VP of Contracting and Operations. So essentially, you're looking after the business on the day-to-day and at a higher level.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think a fun story, and this is a fun story for small business and family business, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, but in 2020, when COVID started going down in March, my grandfather came in and told my aunt, who has run the finance and HR side of the business, and I've run the kind of the field stuff, right? He came in March of 2020 and said, "Hey, I'm going to the house. Peace. See it." And so he has kind of been real inactive the last few years. And so we kind of got thrown right into the flames, right into a kind of a crazy time in the business, not really knowing what's going on, and tried to make decisions about equipment purchases and how to bid things. And I feel like we were taught well, and we've made good decisions over that time period. But definitely, there was a couple of times where I called my grandfather and said, "Hey, what do you think we should do here?" And he's like, "I don't know. What y'all are doing is way different than." We were building house pads back in the 80s. I have no idea. So, but yeah, that's kind of my general job, is overseeing all of everything from pre-construction all the way to closeout, and maintenance in our fleet. And we have a pretty large trucking division and a roll-off dumpster division. So it's really the construction and then logistics and waste. So
Wait, there's a lot going on there. Where are you guys out of?
So we're headquartered out of Columbus, Mississippi. So what I always describe is we are in the perfect middle triangle. If you drew a triangle from like New Orleans up to Memphis to Birmingham, so that core deep south, like you just draw a big circle in the south, we're almost dead center.
Nice, cool. Are you getting affected by any of this hurricane stuff, or that's not your way, or is it?
Yeah, that's all been. The last one was east of us, and this one is Milton south of us too. So we've dodged the hurricanes this year so far, but that's not normal.
Do you try to look up any, because a big thing right now, I got some buddies in the States, is like some of the disaster, contracts or something like that. Is that something that you guys look at, or you're just like, you know what, we'll let the guys that deal with that?
Not really. We don't chase that work. Now, when a tornado comes through, if it's locally, we try to jump in there, but we try not to get too far out of, 100 miles or so. And that's really, a lot of that stuff is just going out and trying to help get trees off people's houses, and it's more, I've never been paid to do it. You know what I mean? So, but the big FEMA cleanup and that kind of stuff, I think a lot of folks, there's companies, particularly in the South, that they just chase that work, and that's pretty much all they do. And they just sit on go for a situation like this week to happen.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Talk to me about Forge Your Path. What's that? What do you got going on there?
All right. So Forge, I think, is something that I'm super proud of, and it was born out of complaining. And so about 5 or 6 of friends that run other construction businesses locally, back about 7 years, I think this was 2018 is really kind of when this conversation started. We were all kind of complaining about not being able to find folks, right? There was 2 groups of us. There was myself and a mentor of mine who ran an asphalt company here locally. We were kind of complaining about, I can't find anybody. We actually were on a job one day, and we were prepping the base for his company to come in and pave behind us, and he was coming to check it out. And one of our guys was on one of our road graders, and my mentor kind of bumped me a little bit, and he was like, "How many guys at your company do you have that can run that road grader?" We probably had 50 people at the time. And I said, I was kind of joking. I said, well, 1.5, on a good day, and he was like, "I bet they're both over 65 or over 55 or something like that." And I was like, "Oh yeah, most definitely." He said, well, they're going to be gone soon, right? Yeah. And he questioned me. He goes, "What are you going to do about it?" And nobody had asked me before that moment. We get into these conversations and we complain about can't find anybody, the next generation, yada, the same thing that we hear in our industry over and over, and the old timers gripe about, and everybody gripes about this, right? But nobody says, well, what are you going to do about it? That was the first time. And I didn't have an answer. I said, I don't know. And he said, well, think about that. And so we got to talking to our local community college about building a heavy civil program to teach operator training and that kind of stuff, and just started pulling at threads, trying to figure out where we could get some help. Well, at the same time, we had some friends that were really more in the general contracting space that were doing the same thing. And somebody had challenged them to do the same thing. Like, well, what are you going to do about it? And they plugged in at the high school level, whereas we were plugging in at kind of the community college level. And somebody just said, hey, do you do you know that these folks are doing the same thing over at the high school? And we got connected, and we all knew each other, but we didn't know each other was doing anything. And so we just got together and kind of hung out a couple of times and was like, let's do something about this. So fast forward to now, 7 years later, and we do all kinds of events. We're a few days away from being official 501c3. We've been functioning under a umbrella of like a community nonprofit the last few years. So
What's a 501 third bullet A?
oh yeah, you're Canadian. I feel like this is it. So that's like your official nonprofit corporation status in the States. So yeah, before we were working as a project for a nonprofit, and I always point that out because I always want to leave this conversation challenging people to do something about it. And you don't have to go out and start a nonprofit to do good, right? We're just now 7 years later, an official nonprofit. But we do all kinds of events, and we do two things. One is we try to expose expose the current generation and the next generation to careers in construction. And then the second thing is we work alongside educators to help provide the education for those folks. And so you can't have one without the other. You can get out, and there's groups out there that do a great job of recruiting and telling the industry about things, but somebody always seems to lack that piece of like, well, who's going to train them, right? And so we do those two things. So a great example of the way we do that is here in a few weeks, we have what we call the Forge Your Path Expo. This is our big kind of Super Bowl thing that we do. And what it is a 2-day, or really a 2.5-day hands-on career expo for kids. And it's 8th graders. And so we bring in 8th graders from, I think last year was about 19 different schools. It was over 2,500 8th graders. And they come in and they get to pour concrete, get to climb on machines, play on simulators. Last year, Husqvarna bought a remote-controlled demo robot, and they all got to put it on. This year, Husqvarna is bringing a coring rig, a remote-controlled coring rig. So they actually get to like core into a manhole. They get to tie rebar, all kinds of stuff. I mean, you're talking about kids that have probably never held a hammer, getting to run a remote-controlled demo robot. So really impactful. But now we do that strategically because in Mississippi, in the second semester of your 8th grade year, you choose your education track for high school. And so we get there right into the last moment, and we show them how cool construction is. And then they come back from Christmas break and they're like, oh, I want to go down the construction engineering path. And then we help the high schools actually do training and work on their programs and their curriculum and do field trips and all that kind of stuff. So, but that's Forge in a big, that's how I can summarize it there.
That's really cool, man. Like, I honestly, I agree. Like before and like during COVID conversations where there's not enough people, and everybody just kept saying that, myself included, there's not enough people, not enough people. Okay, well, who's training them? Who's doing something about it? And I like that because you guys are actually doing something about it. And it's nice because you need that, because a lot of the old timers, they're like, the next generation, they don't know how to work. They don't want to work. And, that's just really not the case. I think that they just need proper guidance and, shown that stuff. Like, I got my love for blue collar and working in the industry by doing exactly that, but not because, a nonprofit pulled me out and were like, hey, here's a shovel. It's like, I grew up in the business with my father, and I learned how cool it was at such a young age because I was actually doing those things. And it's really cool because you're giving that experience now to those kids to get that in their brain going, you know what, that was a lot of fun. It's really fulfilling, and you can go outside and it's a really cool career path. So that's really neat that you're doing that. What's, I guess, the success of it so far? Like, have you seen a lot, like, great success from it? Has it been long enough where you've seen somebody go from grade 9 to 12 and then it's like, hey, now they're actually in construction?
This year will actually be our first year that students that went through our first 8th grade expo are graduating from high school. So hopefully we're hoping to see those returns now, but that's just off the expo. Kind of that second piece about building education programs and working with educators, we already are seeing the fruits of that labor. And we do probably 8 or 9 different programs. One of them that is my favorite one is this heavy civil certificate program at our local community college. And it's a 15-week program that anybody can go through. A fresh graduate from high school can go through it, or somebody that's been working in the industry can go through it. And It is 15 weeks of learning how to run all kinds of equipment. We have several simulators, so they get tons of simulator time. So they really build that muscle memory, but they also get a survey of how water, sewer, storm drainage works, how asphalt works, how concrete works, how compaction and earthwork happens, all of those. And it's kind of just they're not getting anything close to a civil engineering degree, right? But they get to understand that compaction's important, and here's how optimum moisture roughly works, right? And so that program, we have gone through about 5 cycles of it, and we have roughly half a dozen students that have come out of that program that came to work for us. They've gone to different places. That program was designed to accelerate students in their career, right? So they don't come out of that program knowing what to do. But we have seen over and over with each student that comes out of that program, they, in their first 6 months of working at our company, it's almost like they've been in our company for 2 or 3 years. Because you think about this, when you get out, if you've never worked for an earth moving company, and, you know, what's the first thing you do? Well, you get on a shovel, and then eventually they let you get on a skid steer, and then eventually you get on a mini excavator or a roller, right? And you kind of work your way up. We are baking into these students how an excavator works, how a dozer works, right? Because it's really hard to teach a student how a dozer works on a job site. It's almost impossible, right? Because it's this battle between education and production. We are taking production out of play and putting it pure education, and they just get reps. And so it's awesome because we're not a huge company. We don't need 30, 40 people every single year coming through this program. But if we can pick up 2 or 3 every year, and they're cutting off those early years of eating glass in the field, it's massive impact. We're now kind of changing that program into having more leadership aspect to it in a second semester and that kind of stuff. So hopefully we'll accelerate them into leadership as well. But yeah, massive, huge impact.
That's a great point, and I love the fact that you're teaching them leadership, because I truly believe that with the right training and leadership, you can make an incredible asset, human being, person out of that training. Like, I am not. I do a lot of reading on the side, about self-help books and leadership books, and how to be a better entrepreneur, how to be a better father, how to be a better boss, like all these books, right? And I take all this, and I just think, like, if I could instill into my brain how I'm thinking about how other people are perceiving, okay, there's confrontation, go towards the confrontation, don't avoid. If I could get my foremans and my crew leads and my supervisors all on that same page of thinking like that, we would be an unstoppable force. And those people would make so much more of an impact at their work, which result in them having a better quality of life, because they're going to get paid more. They're going to excel at their career more. I truly believe that teaching people, like, I love that you're doing that, because leadership is so important.
Really, in our industry, right? There's skills and there's knowledge, right? There's understanding how things work, and understanding how, and that can be extended to how people work, how communication works. We have this problem that I feel like we have to acknowledge in our industry, is that 10, 20, 30 years ago, the folks that advanced upward, had that upward mobility in a company, it was because they were the best dozer operator, right? Or they had been here the longest, right? It's the Peter principle. I mean, there's a book about it from the 50s, and I could send it to you for reference. But it's this whole idea that in corporate America, we promote people to ignorance just based on tenure, right? The longer you're here, and then you stop getting promoted when you're not any good at your job anymore, and then all of a sudden we start losing performance at our company. We have to change that thought process in construction, that we can't just promote the guy that's been running the dozer the longest, right? We have to actually promote leadership. Well, someone's got to teach them leadership. And so, yeah, I'm with you 100%, is that we have to think more than just skills now. It's more than just operating equipment. It's more than just the knowledge of how does concrete work. There's another knowledge base to that. So,
and like, especially even stuff that we do, like, I grew up, like, for 3 generations, my family has been fed and supported, and, my employees and their families been supported by the work we do. So, excuse my ignorance, but we aren't building a rocket ship when we're doing construction. We're putting pipe together. There's a lot of stuff to learn. Do not get me wrong. It is difficult work. It's grueling. You're out in the weather. it's savage work, but we're not building a rocket ship or sending something into orbit. So I truly believe that leadership is more important than skill, because if you have the right person that grabs onto leadership, generally they're going to have, the mechanics or the being able to function their body to be able to understand, okay, this is how this pipe has to go together. You got this end. Okay, great. Well, we can figure this out. This is how this machine, you're supposed to manipulate it and move it this way. That's how I think. Like, I truly think the leadership aspect to it is so far important than skills, because I could put a guy on a dozer tomorrow and I could see him run it, and within the first 10 minutes, I can tell if that guy's going to have it or not.
Yeah.
I grew up in the industry. And you have too, like, you can tell in the first 10 minutes, is this somebody who's going to get onto it? Some people's learning curve is slower than others. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying after 10 minutes, get out of there, you suck.
Yeah,
but you can generally tell by looking at another guy that's got it and say, this kid has it or this kid doesn't. Leadership is so important.
Aaron Witt gave me a copy of the book Everybody Matters one time by Bob Chapman. I don't know if you've ever read that book, but I read that book and then I had a conversation with Aaron about it, and he pointed out something that has stuck with me forever, that is just in this vein of conversation, is that we all build the same thing. The way y'all build projects in Canada is entirely, is not that different than the way we build them here in the Deep South. And we use the same tools, right? Caterpillar makes the same thing. Komatsu makes the same. All of our tools are the same. We differentiate ourselves from our competitors by our people. The people move the machines, and the machines don't move themselves yet, right? But we have to differentiate ourselves by improving our people, because I can only make that bulldozer work as much as possible. Good people make good machines effective, right? But yeah, I mean, I'm totally with you that leadership has been forgotten. We've got to focus on that more. I don't know that educators, the public education does a great job of that. And so we work really well with our educators here through Forge, but we have learned that they have been programming public education to teach skills, whether it's multiplication or it's heavy equipment operation, right? They can teach something out of a book to these skills. As an employer, when we get them, we've got to focus on leadership. We've got to focus on the human and soft side. So Macaulay Whitaker, who's our VP of Talent and Culture, she came on board with us about 2 years ago. And so we have been working on what we call the Burns Built Academy. And that is the continuation of education once they get to our company. And so at Forge, we try to catch them young, right? And introduce them that, hey, construction's cool. And then in high school, we try to get them to find out all the different parts of construction. You may think being an electrician's cool. You may think being a plumber's cool. You may think running a bulldozer is the coolest thing ever, right? I just happen to be that guy, right, that thinks big iron is cool. That's not for everybody, but if you pick that, okay, then we're going to get you the next piece of that education, right? And that's kind of the certificate program that I talked about. Well, then you pick a company you want to go work for. And when you get to that company, hopefully we try to bring you in and mold you into the soft skills. Communication classes is what we're working on. Leadership. We've talked about book clubs and all kinds of different things of trying to, bind together. But we have to start thinking about education as a runway, right? And it's not just you go do this thing, you check a box, right? And the 4-year universities and those types of things, that's kind of like your end of education, and then you go to work, right? Well, when you're here, we want to continue. Whether you came through a 4-year education in an engineering program or you just graduated high school, we still have to pick up where you left off and continue. And so we've been trying to work on those and build classes, and it's weird. We're building this school at our company, right? And that's people think that's crazy. And, my grandfather, he gets it, but he never dreamed that was necessary, back when he started in business. So,
but it is now, and that's what I'm curious to know from you too. I mean, these 8th graders, I mean, you have 2,500 kids come in, or even the high schoolers, or what are you seeing in the next generation that is, I guess, different from our generation, say, we're what generation? We're millennials? We're millennials.
Yeah. We're young millennials.
Yeah. So then what's Gen Y or X, whatever they're calling them, What are you seeing different from them to us? Do you see a difference? Because like everyone's, oh, they're lazy, they don't want to work, they just want to be on their phones or this or that. Like, what's changed? What is changing? Are they all lazy? Are there good ones? Are there bad ones?
I think it's the difference in gratification, right? And the timing of gratification is the core part. It's not that they're lazy. But I think technology, social media, TV, whatever, over the last several generations, and you can see it in us, right? We're one of the first, because the internet really rapidly changed this instant gratification thought process, right? And it's become even worse because this next generation is so connected from a communication level, from an information level, that everything happens so fast. And so what I see differently now is that they want to experience more faster. And so I think you can probably sympathize with this. And a lot of people, our generation, is that we grew up really fast. We had this desire that, I knew when I was 22, I was trying to be a millionaire, right? That's what I wanted, right? And I wanted to be partner. I wanted to take over the world, right? And I worked my 20s away. And I've
amen to that.
Think about it all the time. That when I was in college, I was still working 60 hours a week. Taking full load of classes, and I'm proud of that now. But it was this thought process that subconsciously I needed to grow up as fast as I could and progress through life. And if I wanted to get what I wanted, I needed to get there as soon as possible. Not it was going to get there. Well, that has become even more exaggerated now, and so we have to, as employers, have to think about it differently. That we have to give rewards often, and it's not participation trophies. It's we have to acknowledge it more. And so they want to learn more skills faster. And so I see with like this academy that we're building that there's a much more appetite for education at that level. And if we provide it, they will show up to classes. We had, somebody to come in and talk about mortgages, right? Well, the 20-year-olds were the ones that came, right? And you may think, well, duh, the 40s probably already have a mortgage. That's not true in our industry, right? Home ownership is way lower in our industry than it is in a lot of industries. But the young kids coming into our company, they want to learn the technology. They're hungry for, oh, we'll go to the machine control classes. Yeah, I want to go to the class to teach retaining walls so that I know how to do it. They're doing it so that they can advance through life faster. And many people look at that as a negative thing. And if we can figure out how to leverage that high level of desire, then you can accelerate them through life, because they do want to learn. They want to grow. They want more. They want more responsibility. They want more authority. And you just have to leverage that.
And I agree with that. And do you think that is because of social media and because they see so much success online and it's comparing to other people? Because for me, that's what it was. That's what it was for me. Like I was the same when as soon as I got out of high school, dude, I knew that it was like, I want this. I want to be able to go on trips with my family when I'm older. Like I knew what my 30s were, when I'm 30, what I wanted. Like I want a Corvette. I want make sure my wife drives a Tahoe. Like I wanted all those things. So you're right. I worked through my 20s, but I did that also because in partial, I saw online all this success from these influencers, because we came up in this era where all of a sudden there's influencers making millions of dollars, and you had Logan Paul and like guys like that that was buying like Lambos and stuff. And you're like, man, I want all this too.
Yeah. So I think it's natural human progression. I think that the internet accelerated it, but let's go way back in time. It used to take a lot more effort for us to get food, right? We either had to, roam the planet, and then we went into agriculture and we started doing that. It was not very long ago as a species that we spent every single waking hour of the day gathering food. 100 years ago, there's still people that they spend a lot of their time just trying to meet their basic needs. I think about it. Are you familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Maslow was a psychologist back from, I think, the 20s or so, and he developed this thought process, and it's a pyramid, and it's that as humans, we have levels of priority of needs that we want to obtain, right? And so food is number one. If we don't obtain food, we don't live. The next thing is safety and shelter, and I'm going to oversimplify this real quickly, but the next level is safety and shelter. We need food, and then we want to be safe. And then the next thing is community, love. Finding shelter and safety is more important than finding a spouse. If we don't have food, we don't have shelter, we're not, reproducing. And so then the top of it is self-actualization. And that is feeling good about ourselves and all of that piece, right? And so the thing is that everything has become cheaper as society, as our civilization kind of advances, right? It's easier to get food. It's easier to get shelter. And now what the internet has done has made it so cheap to find community. You can communicate with people. You can find what feels like love. And very quickly, that self-actualization can be found kind of in a pseudo way, right? Is that I posted this picture on the internet and everybody liked it. So I feel good about myself. Like I'm not Jake Paul, but I got 200 likes on my beach photo, right? And that's self-actualization. I mean, that's self-esteem and that's the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so what it is that we have a generation that it was so easy to get food, shelter, community, that they don't know the order of the priorities. And that's getting worse. And so we have to break it back down. And Macaulay and I talk about this all the time, that a lot of times what we are teaching primarily young men is that you have to focus on making your truck payment. All right. And then we've got to save up, and we've got to get enough for a down payment on a house. And then we got to get a mortgage. And we're more parenting as employers a lot. The internet accelerated it, but it kind of took those hierarchy of needs and flipped it upside down. And it just made it so cheap that now we're having to fix the bottom again and show them how much work it takes to feed yourself. So
what I say about the next generation is that they lack patience, which is essentially is what you're saying. Is
it's cheap. It's cheap.
Exactly. So what I find interesting though is that, like, I always say, I run a daycare for adults.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm exaggerating when I say that. I got an awesome team, but I mean, some days it's okay. This person's like, or this one, this guy's upset because this, but I find it interesting that you are taking it upon yourself to, like, you actually give a shit. And it's pretty crazy. Like, I mean, I think you care more than like me, which makes you a better person, because I lack the patience as well with some of these guys, because I mean, I just find it really interesting how deep you get into this, and like you're setting up a school. Like, why do you do all this? Why do you care so much?
And, I've asked myself this question a lot over years, and I have a story that I can tell, just like everybody has a story. During COVID, when I took over a lot of that responsibility for my grandfather from the field, after a little while, that pressure got to me, and I got into some pretty rough mental state and started to feel trapped, that I couldn't do what I wanted to do, right? It's that whole classic, do you run your business or does your business run you? And the business was definitely running me. And I got into where anxiety was so crippling. I got into suicidal thoughts, thinking that suicide was the only escape from this trap, right? And I took some time off in the summer of 21, and I was able to get away from work for a while and just go radio silent with my family. And during that trip, just getting away from everything, I realized that I was crippled by the thought of I'd kind of calculated the amount of employees and their family, and it was this number around 300. And I was like, there's 300 people every day that rely on my decision making. And if I make poor decisions, I could negatively affect their lives, right? And that was this crippling thought, was that, man, they rely on me for their well-being. And that was scary. During that trip, I realized, gosh, I was looking at that wrong. It's perspective. I'm looking at it in a fear perspective, that I'm scared that I'm going to ruin their lives. Instead, I need to look at it as an opportunity that I get to. Yeah. And so that's my self-actualization, right? When I look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, my food's taken care of, right? I run a business. I have good income. My shelter's there. I have family. I have a loving wife and daughter and great community of fantastic friends. My self-actualization is that I feel good about what I'm doing. And I want to be a good leader. And I want to feel like I want to go to sleep every night and go, I gave it all, right? And I impacted people positively. I'm changing people's lives for the better. And so that kind of seems like, a bunch of hogwash, but it's also that I think maybe I'm just wired in a way that I feel guilty. There's still some of that remnants of that anxiety, is that I feel guilty if I'm not putting people first, right? And I tied that back. My grandfather and I were having a conversation about this a couple weeks ago, and I told him that I wanted to leave the business better than I found it, right? I watched him when I was a kid grow this business and fight really hard every single day, 14, 16 hours a day trying to build this thing essentially with his bare hands, him and his brother. And now my brother is runs operations with me, and we work together every day. And there's this conversation in our family is that we really want to leave it better than we found it. And the way that we see to do that is not necessarily through growth in size. In some ways it is, but a lot of it is that we want people to go, you know what? I love working for the Burns family. They're a great family to work for. They really care about us. And that makes me proud because my grandfather he's a great man, and people brag about him all the time. And I'm like, man, I'm living in this shadow. Like, how do I live up to this great dude? So maybe there's some inner family, rivalry. I've got to treat people better than my grandfather. Maybe that's to that extent, I don't know. I think a lot of it's guilt driven. Don't put it that, I got it all figured out. There's a lot of it. It's heavy to care that much. Right.
Yeah. I think that it's really interesting. And can people stay up to date with what you're kind of doing with Forge Your Path or online and stuff like that?
Yeah, so we're pretty heavy on Instagram and LinkedIn with Forge, and I mean it's the same stuff in both places, so you can see them in both places.
And then your construction company, they on social media as well too.
Yeah, so we're Burns Dirt, and we're all of them. So Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, you can see us everywhere, and we kind of pile everything into Burns Dirt real heavy. And Charlie, we've got a full-time social media guy, Charlie, that just kills it. He kills it. So plug in. And the thing with Forge is we're exclusive to the state of Mississippi, and we're proud of that, and we try to focus on that. But if you want to be involved in Forge and you're not in Mississippi, we will teach you how to do it. We're 100% open playbook. Come to us and we'll help you do your own version where you're at. And that's kind of our call to action is like, you got to do something about it. And you got to do something about it where you're at. And we would love to help. And there's plenty of folks out there that are doing it. Let's just ask. Everybody will tell you the secrets. So.
I love it. You're doing some big things, and I can't wait to stay up to date with what you're doing. Thanks, Nic, for coming on the ConExpo ConAg podcast today.
Appreciate it, man. It's been good.